So get this, podcast listeners. Stacey Abrams financed, staffed, and controlled Fulton County, Georgia's 2020 election. Stacey Abrams, remember, she ran for governor in Georgia and lost, but said she won. She financed, staffed, and controlled the Fulton County, Georgia 2020 election. Fulton County, of course, being the county in which Atlanta is located, the most populous county in the state. And so here is what it says in Gateway Pundit. Evidence unearthed in a court case in Georgia today shows that failed gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams oversaw the staffing for the 2020 election in Georgia. CD Media reported on a court case this morning that unearthed who was really running the 2020 election in Fulton County, Georgia. Evidence presented at this morning's public meeting of the Fulton County Commission shows former Democrat gubernatorial candidate and state representative Stacey Abrams controlled and financed the main contractor used in Fulton County elections during the November 3rd poll and the January 5th U.S. Senate runoff. Evidence showed direct financial underwriting of the staffing service, Happy Faces Personnel Group, that's the name of the staffing service, by groups controlled by Abrams. In other words, a highly partisan Democrat political operative controlled the elections in Fulton County, which also involved a Nigerian national. The meeting is being broadcast live on Fulton County, Georgia Government TV, which is where all this information was gathered. Fulton County residents testified Stacey Abrams owns 16% of Now Account, and that Now Account financed and recruited employees for Happy Faces. So let me say that again. Happy Faces was a staffing service that was hired by Fulton County to staff the elections, sending out ballots for absentee ballots, collecting ballots, and so forth, these kinds of jobs. Stacey Abrams owns 16% of a different company called Now Account, and the Now Account company financed and recruited employees for Happy Faces. So she was funneling through a shell company employees that she controlled inside the election services. And then what could go wrong, maybe? It will be interesting to know, the article says, if the characters who worked overtime on election night, shoving Biden ballots into tabulation machines 2 and 3 times, were some of the individuals hired through Abrams-backed staffing services. We learned a couple of days ago that a judge had postponed the depositions for 2 individuals who allegedly committed crimes, running ballots through machines more than once and recorded on video, which, by the way, if you were to post that video today on Facebook or on any social media company, you know what would happen? You would be banned. I think that clearly they would take the post down, but I think that they would be sufficiently triggered, the 15-year-old judges at these various fact-checking organizations would take you down. They would just take you off of Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, everywhere. And so to further make the point in the Western Journal, there's an audit that's going on in Arizona. And the Arizona audit hand count should be finishing up. The paper examination continues at the rate of 100,000 ballots per day. So in the Western Journal, it says the following. The Maricopa County, Arizona audit team reported on Tuesday that the hand count of the 2.1 million ballots cast in that county in November's general election, it's almost complete. Audit update. Hand count of ballots was completed yesterday with the exception of Braille ballots. The paper examination phase continues and we are examining over 100,000 ballots per day. So this is a forensic audit, and the forensic audit that is occurring because they are taking their time and examining actually the ballots themselves. For example, if a ballot is mailed to you because it's an absentee ballot, then by definition, the ballot would have to have what? Creases from having been folded and mailed. So they're looking at that. They're also looking at other anomalies as well. Arizona Republican Party chairwoman Kelly Ward, who is not involved in the audit, but is monitoring it closely, explained what the paper examination phase involves in a Wednesday video. The audit is continuing with the forensic analysis of the kind of paper used for the ballots. The auditors are really making sure that all of the ballots were printed on the proper types of paper. Ha ha, she said. Wouldn't that be interesting? Wouldn't that be interesting if for once, instead of arguing over whether there's a hanging Chad like in the Gore-Bush race, or whether or not the ballot is from a legitimate person, or the signature is right or the signature is off, rather than arguing over those things, wouldn't it be a lot more interesting and clear-cut if the actual type of paper, which is a special paper that the ballots are printed on, was not consistent? That there were maybe thousands of ballots that were printed on the wrong paper, and how on earth could that be possible? So furthermore, she says they also are conducting the inspection of the actual marks on the ballots themselves. They're verifying that, the little ovals that you have to fill in wherever you have a paper ballot, that those ovals were filled in by hand and not by some sort of printing device. And that's why this audit is so important. And that's why it's called a forensic audit, because obviously, if you're filling out the little ovals with a pencil or a pen, then that pencil or pen is going to make a mark that has ink, right? It's actual, done by hand. A printer, not quite the same thing. And so that's why the testing is so thorough, and that's why the testing is so important. And look, we, the people across the country, deserve to know how it is that particular county flipped the way it did. Did it flip because Donald Trump simply lost it? Or did it flip because there was some other nefarious thing going on and that thing was organized? I'm not really sure, but good for Arizona and Maricopa County for checking and doing this forensic audit. And by the way, Pennsylvania is discussing doing the same thing in certain jurisdictions. They're also doing the same thing in Georgia. And there are other places. Look, I have a friend who is in the Maryland House of Delegates, and he represents Talbot County, which is a, relatively speaking, rural county. And he called me up the other day and he said, hey, do you know that thing that's going on over there in Maricopa County in Arizona? I said, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. He says, well, Talbot County has always been a Republican county. However, in November last year, Talbot County flipped to Joe Biden. He said, there's no way it happened. I don't believe it. And I'm just wondering, how do I sign up, or who do I call, or how do I connect myself with the people that know how to do these forensic audits? And I said, yeah, that's actually, a really good point. And I believe in my heart that if this were to happen nationwide in all of the jurisdictions where there were question marks, the only thing that can come out of this is a positive thing. Either we determine that there's fraud, we determine how much of it there is, and we find out who's behind it and we arrest them and we charge them, as we should. And that would improve confidence in our elections. But meanwhile, there is lawsuit after lawsuit about this particular issue. Lawsuits that are being brought by, guess who? Democrats, Democrat attorneys, Democrat operatives, because they don't want forensic audits to continue or to even happen to begin with. Imagine that. You don't want the ballots to be looked at. Someone pulls out a ballot. There are all these stories where people were pulling out ballots and they didn't have creases in them, as I mentioned before. And so those reports went out. The media stopped reporting it. You can't even say it on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube without them taking the post down and warning you that they might ban you for life. You can't do any of those things. But somehow we can finally have these forensic audits done, and we can give people a level of satisfaction that things are at least, kind of copacetic with the election. I'm hoping that's what happens.